Hey everybody, so we're continuing our deep dive into Buddhist philosophy. And we left off with the question of enlightenment or awakening or nirvana. And I wanted to continue that inquiry with you by approaching it through the lens of this question. What does an enlightened person know? Enlightenment or awakening or nirvanic consciousness, as we were describing it before, is elusive because it is ineffable. So maybe we can make some real progress, I'm hoping, by approaching through this question. How would reality appear through the lens of enlightened consciousness? Let's try that on. And I think Buddhism responds to that question in two ways. One, with a list called the 3 marks of existence. So we'll look at that. And another is this big, beautiful idea called interdependent origination. And we'll look at that one in our little talk today too. So let's start with that first one, that 3-point list called the 3 marks of existence. So the first one is anitya, or impermanence. From the consciousness of awakening, one sees the arising and fading of all forms. This isn't a surprise to anybody who's paid any attention at all, right? In fact, we can check all 3 of these ideas on the 3 marks of existence against our own experience, and Buddha suggests that, in fact, we should. Buddhism is nothing if not a pragmatic philosophy, a philosophy of practicality, of everyday observance, and of checking all of these claims against the authority of our own experience. That's how Buddha got to where he got, and he's suggesting we ought to do the same and not follow him, but discover these insights in the verification process of our own authenticity. So that first idea, anitya, is simply the claim that all forms arise and fade. Some forms live very briefly. A mayfly lives 24 hours, but some forms last a while. A proton lasts for billions of years. But all forms, that means material things, thoughts are forms, energy is a form. All forms come and go. No big surprise there. The second mark of existence, the second quality that reality has, seen through the lens of enlightened consciousness, is a little trickier than anitya. It's anatman. Anatman. In English, no self or no permanent essences. So here the claim is that all forms are aggregates, are combinations of lots of other little forms. And if you remove all the aggregate pieces, there's no essential changeless essence left behind. Here's the connection to the Hindu work we did before. You recall Brahman Atman. It was the central claim of Vedanta philosophy, that Brahman Atman, or the ground of being, is also what we are. And when we talk about Brahman within sentient beings, we call it Atman. And in the Vedanta worldview, throughout the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, was the claim that Atman is changeless, unborn, undying, Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita. There never was a time when you did not exist, nor will there ever be a time when you cease to exist. This Atman is changeless, so Hinduism taught. Well, Buddha, being a good Hindu, and being a practical guy, in his meditation, in his yoga experience, went looking for the Atman, and he couldn't find it. And so Buddha taught, that there is no Atman. This is one of the most slippery parts of Buddhist philosophy, the doctrine of no self. That what we are is a magnificent, beautiful, complex phenomenon, an event, a happening, made of matter and energy and perception and consciousness and on and on and on. But all of that comes together for a while and then eventually disperses again like everything else. And thirdly, on this little list we're discussing right now, the 3 marks of existence, the third one after anitya or impermanence, anatman or no self, is dukkha, suffering or anxiety or restlessness. This is another quality that reality has when seen through the enlightened mind, namely that life hurts and that suffering is inherent in existence. Because again, everything is impermanent. All forms arise and fade. And how can you help but fall in love with it all? And then when it is taken from you, when it does dissolve, how can that not hurt? So hurting, attachment, disappointment, and anxiety, fear about future changes is one of the qualities of there being a world at all. And to accept that and to make peace with that is what wisdom looks like. To accept impermanence, say yes to it, to accept anatman, to realize that I am also part of the ephemera of the cosmos. And thirdly, dukkha, the dissatisfaction and anxiety that comes up as a result of having to navigate all of that. So Buddhism really goes out on a limb here with this no self doctrine particularly. What a startling juxtaposition to the theologies of the West, especially Christianity, where we are taught an opposite idea, namely that the soul is eternal, is immortal, that I will always exist in some non-physical plane as Peter Boland, as insert your name here. So Buddhism just kind of pulled the rug out from underneath that idea completely. Now, the other piece that I want to think about with you is the interdependent origination piece. Here the claim is, and it's connected to anitya, that idea we talked about a minute ago. Here the claim is that all events, all phenomena are caused by other events that came before them. Nothing is the cause of itself, right? That seems pretty obvious. And so everything arises because of causes that came before it. You know, the flower did not cause itself to bloom. And yet its causation comes not from one source. The flower isn't caused by the seed alone, although the seed is necessary. But so is the rain, so is the sun, so is gravity, so are the periodic table of elements, so are all of the laws of science, so are the wind that blew the seed to that place, or the gardener who planted that seed in the ground. Everything has many mothers. And everything arises this way then, in a state of deep interdependence with everything else. This is sometimes also called mutual causation. It's a beautiful, potent idea, it seems to me, in Buddhism that helps us really expand our understanding about causation, about how things work, especially, and this is an interest of mine, especially when you bring it into the arena of social justice. For example, what causes poverty? What causes income inequality? What causes injustice? And it's never one thing. It is a symphony of causal threads that go back into the past. That's what makes social justice work so difficult and so vexing. You can't just write one law about one thing and then fix a problem. It's too nuanced, it's too multifarious. And that's good news and also a challenge, isn't it? So maybe one more example on interdependent origination to drive the point home a little better. Let's say you're on a hike, you're walking through the woods and you're hiking along a river. And the river takes a sharp bend, and right in the sharp bend there's an eddy. There's a curve and there's a whirlpool where the water starts swirling around and, sucking things down into it. And you see it and you say to your friend, hey, look at this whirlpool. That's really cool. Will you help me pick it up and bring it home? I want to put it in my garden. It would make a nice water feature. Well, it's ludicrous, of course. You can't pick a whirlpool up out of a river as if it were an object. A whirlpool is not a thing, it's an event, it's a happening, it's a phenomenon. In fact, look how the language tricks us. Our language, English, is made primarily of nouns, and nouns are distortions, aren't they? Because the word whirlpool implies that whirlpool is a separate, distinct thing. But in fact, and this is where Buddhism is going to help us, in fact, a whirlpool is better known as a whirlpooling. Let's turn all the verbs into nouns. Instead of calling it a tree, it's really a treeing. Instead of calling it a whirlpool, it's really a whirlpooling. The whirlpooling is something that the river is doing. It's an action that the river is taking, or should I say rivering. So the whirlpooling is something that the rivering is doing, and the rivering has no independent existence. It's something that the streamings are doing, and the streamings are something that the raining is doing, and the raining is something that the clouding is doing, and the clouding is something that the oceaning is doing, and the oceaning is something that the rivering is doing. Now, which one of those moments in that cycle do you want to freeze and isolate and describe as a distinct and independent thing? You can't, because all phenomena are interdependent. Everything proceeds in this way. This is what interdependent origination means. Now, Buddhism, obviously, as we've seen just now, dips into some pretty complex metaphysics, questions of what is reality. But out of this Buddhist portrait, we get a very fluid picture of reality. So this is what Enlightenment consciousness understands or sees about reality, this experience that we're all having, the fluidity of it, the impermanence of it, the interdependency of it. Contemporary teacher of Zen Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh, calls it interbeing instead of being, interbeing. There is no being distinct from all of the rest of being. There is only interbeing. This obviously is going to have enormous ethical implications as well about our moral obligation toward karuna, toward compassion again. Because there's no such thing as us against them. There is only us. There's no such thing as me and you. There is only us. There is only this. And yet Buddha kept in his own time and in his own work dragging us back to the here and now, to not get lost in clouds of abstraction. He told a beautiful parable, and I'll leave you with this. It's called the parable of the arrow. He said there was a man walking through the forest with some of his friends, and all of a sudden he was shot in the chest with an arrow. And he fell to the forest floor, and he's lying there, and this arrow shaft is coming up out of his chest. And he says to his friends, wait, before you pull it, I know it's a poisoned arrow, and I know you think you have to pull it out before the poison kills me, but before you pull out the arrow, I just have to know, what kind of wood is this on this arrow shaft? Do you think it's pine or teak or mahogany or oak? And what kind of feathers are these on the end of the arrow? Do you think they're from a seagull or an owl or a crow or a pigeon or a raven? And the tip that's in my chest, do you think it's made of obsidian or copper or wood or iron? And wait, who do you think shot the arrow? Was it someone from the Brahmin caste or the Kshatra caste? Was it a man? Was it a woman? Was this a hunting accident, or is this an attempted murder? And on and on and on they talked until the man died, the end. I love these Asian wisdom stories because there's always an idiot. There's always a fool in the story. This guy made a big mistake, didn't he? Now, there's nothing wrong with those questions. I think his problem is a question of timing, of prioritization. Perhaps pull the arrow out first and then make some tea and sit up all night and talking about these fascinating questions. And what Buddha, I think, is mocking here is our obsession with speculative philosophy. Who made the world? Why? How does reincarnation exactly work? When I'm dead, how long do I wait before I'm reincarnated? And what is the nature of evil? And is it anybody's fault? And on and on and on. I think Buddhism is cautioning us against losing a lot of time in unnecessary and probably futile or fruitless speculation, and instead getting down to the real work of getting the poison out. And the poison is, of course, dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, misery, anxiety, unease. That's our work, to root that out. So in our next video, we will take a look at, I think, the central pillar of Buddhism, his diagnosis and prescription for the problem of dukkha, called the Four Noble Truths. So I'll see you on the other side.